So we've got, unless, or do you have some people that were able to join?
One. One.
Okay.
Share our screen.
Okay, so she set that up for us.
Share the screen that's got, yeah, that one. That would work. Check with Erica, see if she can see the screen.
So we do have some missing presenters today. We did download some presentations that we got. So I'd like to just go ahead and do a quick introduction and welcome. Thank you for attending. This is our annual floodplain management plan meeting. This occurs every year, and then we have a formal 5-year update that occurs. Actually, it's going to be for our next year floodplain management plan next spring and summer. And that is a 5-year update that will include updating the TSMS, which is our phase 1 through 4 part of our floodplain management plan for the city. But we'll get into that in a moment. My name is Elizabeth Leibold, and I work in Floodplain Administration, City of Tucson. Alfred Zuniga couldn't make it today. He's our floodplain administrator at the City of Tucson. We have our own floodplain ordinance, and we have various types of meetings. This is the floodplain one. We have a stormwater one coming up in a couple of weeks if you're interested in attending that one. And I'm a civil engineer, and I work with PDSD staff and do reviews and that kind of thing. And we'll go this way, Michael.
Introduce myself?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Mike Ortiz. I'm an engineering associate with PDSD. I specialize in hydrology.
Irene Ogata, I'm with Tucson Water. I'm in the conservation and we call ourselves now Conservation and Stormwater Resource Division.
Savannah Martinez, Emergency Manager, housed in the City Manager's Office.
I'm Israel Garcia. I'm a Senior Environmental Scientist at WSP, assisting the City of Tucson with every stormwater need that they may have.
Good morning, Mal Ali. I'm with DTM Engineer and Manager.
I'm Melanie Alvarez. I'm a planning coordinator with Pima Association of Governments in our watershed planning program.
My name is Cy Miller. I'm with J.E. Fuller. I'm an engineer, hydrologist, project manager.
I'm Chris Rod. I'm also with J.E. Fuller, and also a project manager and a civil engineer.
I'm Jonathan Emmons. I'm retired, and I'm here to learn about what's going on in our city.
And you're a resident?
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for attending.
I'm Stephen Blood. I'm a civil engineer. I'm the section manager of engineering and landscape review at PDSD.
Okay, so our first speaker is going to be Irene Ogata. Maybe I can do the next button, right? Try to do it. Does it work? I don't know. I know it's like of the
down arrow.
Buttons off the full screen.
Yeah, but you should be able to do a down arrow.
Do you want to open the PowerPoint one then?
Oh, it's up and down. That's
Yeah.
what it is here.
Okay.
You want me to do it?
Okay. Yeah. Next. Oh, this screen is. So we went through this, and then we're gonna have the cistern and water availability, then the emergency management plan update, Tucson floodplain management plan update, the Alma wash management plan presentation, and then we're gonna miss the water line sensor one, I think, today. Next. Our floodplain management plan is available to read on our website. There's two of them, the 2016 and the 2020, and we're working on the 2025. Next. The dates of adoption were in August of 2016 and then December 2020. This is considered phase 5 of the Tucson Stormwater Management Study, which is our overall management plan for the city. And so the Tucson Stormwater Management study was done back in the 80s and 90s. Although civil engineering pretty much stays the same over the years, it's water's still running downhill. The equations are pretty much the same. You have new software that's being used, and so we're going to be looking at updating our methodologies and how we're going to be receiving submittals. And we're also going to look at some other updates of updating our drainage manual, making that look nicer. And there's a variety of other things we're working on. Kind of goes over the same thing. Next slide. So for phase 5, the Tucson Floodplain Management Plan, we have these various types of hazard conditions, water course maintenance, flood and erosion management, flood erosion hazard management, sustainability. We have issues of homeless in the water courses and post-fire risk. Next. Kind of talked about what the purpose of the floodplain management plan is. Helps identify key projects and action items that we have to prioritize. And it helps the public understand our unique floodplain conditions and the hazards that we have, and it's our path forward for management of the floodplain. Next slide. We have 7 vulnerabilities, and today's presentations are going to cover several of these items. We have prioritized them based on the committee stakeholder input. Public infrastructure conveyance is our #1 issue. We all have different ideas on this. I actually think #7 should be #1. Geomorphological flood hazards, due to the different aspects of erosion and aggradation and degradation, sediment transport issues. But private drainage infrastructure as well can be a serious problem for the city of Tucson in our urban setting. Next slide. This week is a monsoon safety awareness week starting yesterday, and that's why we're having our floodplain management plan this week. Next slide. And our next speaker is Irene Ogata. Irene, do you want to stand here?
Sure. I don't know. Would it be better for me to log on and just?
It's there.
Oh, it's there?
It's there.
Okay,
I uploaded it.
okay.
There's a next one. Oh,
You want to control?
oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what the.
All right, so why is Tucson Water here, right? So we're conservation and stormwater resource. So here we go. So just a little background about Tucson Water itself. You know, we're 2/3 within the city boundary. So the yellow is the city boundary and 1/3 outside of the city. And so we have over, I don't have my computer, so I have to see what the notes say. So we have over 390 square miles in the service area. So we cover some of Marana and some of Oro Valley as well. And then if we look at what our water resources are, we now say we have 5 water resources. And in general, I don't know, does this one let me do a mouse? Yeah. Oh, maybe not. So in general, our reclaim facility is doing much better, as well as this is our remediation tarp, and then this is our CAP water. And what you don't see is that we notice that even though the population has gone up, our deliverables has gone down. And then so we know that our total demand is also now going down, and part of it we're saying is because of our conservation messages, as well as switching out toilets and washers and more energy and water efficient appliances. And then so also, again, we think that our reclaim facility is much more robust now. What we don't see here is this unmetered water resource, which is our stormwater and our rainwater harvesting. What we see here, and what I'm now going to just launch into, is that portion of what we do at Tucson Water. We know in general, right, our drivers are threefold. There's the federal, the state, and local, and then what we do ourselves within the department. And what I'm just going to cover is the rebates and the incentives, because that's where the rainwater harvesting and the stormwater division is. I'm actually housed in the conservation section, but I have done a lot of the stormwater resource, the green infrastructure portion of it. But we now have a whole new team called Storm to Shade, comprised of 4 individuals who manage that part of Tucson Water's. If you look at your bill, how many are Tucson Water customers? Oh, just about everybody, almost. So if you look at your bill, there is a stormwater fee on there. So that's about 13 cents per CCF, which gives us about $3 million a year. And with that fund, we do the stormwater projects within the city of Tucson, because the fee is only within Tucson residents. We do not charge Pima County residents. And we work a lot with Pima County flood control in those projects. So I'm going to cover the rainwater harvesting rebate, which is up to $2,000 per customer per household. And then also we do have a low income rainwater harvesting program in which we offer rebates, loans and grants. What is it called? What's it called when you have attached, never mind. Okay, so anyway, we do have a low income loan and grant program for rainwater harvesting, and we saw that most of the time the rainwater harvesting was really on the northern part of the city of Tucson, but now we're seeing more applicants on the southern side of the city, and so we think we're getting more to them. We also have this same rainwater harvesting rebate for small commercial properties. Anyone who has a meter less than 3/4 inch meter. If you have more than that, then you cannot apply for this program. There haven't been a whole lot of commercial companies that have applied for this rebate, but that incentive is there just in case they want it. So what are we doing with rainwater harvesting? So just a little refresher. Last year, we updated our criteria. So prior to last year, July of last year, we had a 2-tier system. The first tier was what we called the passive, And there was a limit of $500, and it was only good for material costs. Whereas the active, which is the cisterns and the tanks, it was based on quantity. So it was $1 per gallon. So if you had a 1,500 gallon tank, you got $1,500. And the limit again was $2,000 for either of these programs. But you already see in the passive, you already see there's a cap of 500. So we thought, well, this isn't promoting passive rainwater harvesting. And talking to all the engineers, so I'm sure you all know, it seemed as though the passive side would be much more beneficial than just the tank. So we were trying to put a little equity into that, and we changed it. Oh my gosh, so things got a little messed up here. So basically what we did with the rebate was we did away with those two programs, and we only made one criteria. The criteria was going to be based on quantity only. And the cap was still going to be $2,000, but you could have either passive, active, or a combination of the two. It didn't matter, you know, what you had in your system. It was all based on the capacity of the water you're holding on site. So again, because of that, it was going to $1 per gallon was the capacity. But the other thing that we did was for the earthworks, because we know that if you have a basin, there's infiltration of water. So we were giving basin volume a quantity of 1.5 times its actual calculation. And that was to include the potential of the infiltration of the basins. The other part we did, the third thing that we changed about the criteria, looking both at the city and the county, and city and county both having this 1-inch retention first flush factor, we wanted to also tie into that. So we're saying that the system has to capture 1 inch of that first rainfall within their system in order to get the $1 per gallon. If they do not reach that capacity with their system, then they only get 50 cents per gallon. So the way we were doing this, what we did not do in the past is we did not have this data. We didn't know how much people were storing on site in terms of their passive system. We knew from the active system because it was tank sized, you know, and it ranged anywhere from a 50-gallon barrel up to a 2,000-gallon tank. Some people would do maybe more than 2 tanks, but again, the capacity for us and the rebate was just $2,000. So now what we're doing, everything, the application is electronic. And so they need to enter the size of their roof, which then calculates how much rainfall we're capturing off their roof. We're saying at this point in time that the roof is the watershed, because that's the largest impervious surface usually on a urban property. The other thing we're asking applicants to do is when they put their basins in, all they need to do right now is give us the longest length and the widest width, and then put the calculation in there. By default, we're saying 8 inches is the depth. But if it's more than 8 inches, they have the option of changing this factor right here. But right now, by default, it's 8 inches. And so now we're capturing this data about the volume of the basins. And then again, on the back end, the calculation, given the length, width, and the depth, we, in the back end, add that 1.5 times the capacity of that volume in order to give them credit for infiltration. Right now, you see there's a little cube over there. Right now, the calculation is based on a cube, but we know that may not be the true shape of the basin. So we're also looking at an inverted trapezoid and an ellipse. And so we're looking at those calculations, but in looking at those calculations, we're actually going out in the field and doing some measurements of actual basins to compare to see which one is the closest. So again, what we have now is the volume that's coming off the roof, and then the volume of the system size, and then if they exceed the volume of the capacity of the 1-inch rainfall, then they get the $1 per gallon. And most of the applicants so far, so we've only been doing this since July of last year. So most of the applicants have met the capacity, so they have gotten the $1 per gallon rebate. So what may be of interest to this group is, so how much water are we collecting? We are so excited about, at least I'm excited about this, because we never had this data before. And now we have data. Is it wrong or right? Well, we're looking a little deeper on that as well. Is that we know now by system type what the average amount of water we're collecting. So for an active system, maybe about 1,700 gallons. A passive system is maybe 3,500 gallons. And again, remember, we're giving them credit for 1.5 times the basin volume. And then the combined system, maybe 2,300 gallons. So maybe of interest to this group is, so for that 1-inch rain event, how much are we collecting? We're collecting maybe about 335,000 gallons. Well, it hasn't been the whole year yet, so less than a year. So I think what that means for this group is that much water is being deferred or not reaching the streets because it's being captured on the property itself. Hopefully we'll be able to track that and see, but that's a deferred runoff into the streets that we're saying is happening. And so that's why the connection between the 1-inch rainfall event and then the capacity. So the other change that we did make is we used to have 3 vendors who gave a workshop for this. In order to get your rainwater harvesting rebate, you had to take a workshop. And we used to have 3 vendors, but we found that all of the 3 vendors were giving a little bit of a different information. So now we only have 1 vendor so that we know that the information is consistent. And more than just the information being consistent is that the applicant knows how to apply online now. That was the most important for us back then. But the other thing that we're trying to relay to the homeowner is that it is a system, and like any systems, you need maintenance. So we try to also fill in a little bit about how to maintain a rainwater harvesting system, whether it's a tank or whether it's passive harvesting. And then the last part is coming yet next month is our turf removal and replacement program. We're working on that right now. It's because of a WIFA grant, we're able to do that. And so it's sort of a first come, first serve, and it's only for commercial customers right now, commercial and multifamily customers. We're not doing it for residential as yet, and we'll see how it works out and if we do decrease the amount of water we're using or going out. The other thing why we're doing commercial is most commercial properties have a dual meter. They have both an irrigation meter and their indoor meter. And so that way we can track much better how much water they're using outdoors. Good. Thank you. Any questions? Comments?
Very interesting. Thank you, Irene. I like that first chart. Okay. With our different amounts of water that we have on revenue. Our next slides are, did I skip?
Good. Yes. So again, my name is Savannah. I'm the emergency manager for the city, housed in the city manager's office. I say that I'm housed in the city manager's office because traditionally this role was in fire before about 1.5 years ago. And so the city manager, former city manager, Mr. Ortega moved it into his office about a year and a half ago, just so we can focus on that planning and preparedness that was getting a little bit lost, being that the fire department was really focused on the operational nature. And they didn't have a single person. It was kind of a group of people who kind of managed emergency management versus having one singular person, doing that planning preparedness. And so, yeah. So what's emergency management for those that may not be familiar? The process of planning and responding to hazards that may impact communities, regions, or countries. It involves analyzing risks, making decisions, allocating resources to help mitigate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from effects of emergencies. So 95% of my job is, again, that planning preparedness, so making sure that we're writing up plans against the hazards and the likely hazards likely to happen in the city, and making sure that we're prepared against those, and we're doing training and exercises to make sure that the plans that we write are actually indeed accurate, and that there's no gaps after we write a plan. We have to train and exercise those. And then 5% is actually responding in an active emergency. And traditionally people think public safety specific emergencies, but there's tons of different emergencies that can happen citywide outside of the police and fire specific. For example, Tucson Water has a small emergency management team within the department to make sure that, if the water's contaminated, that we have a response plan for that, or if one of the infrastructure sites is tampered with, that we have a response to that as well. But it can also be, transportation. If there was, knock on whatever, some sort of sinkhole where one of our main corridors was compromised, how we would go about communicating that to the public, and how we would manage losing a huge corridor for a period of time. So I know the update is about the emergency operations plan, but I just did a general emergency management program update. So the last time that the emergency operations plan was updated was in 2014, about 10 years ago. So one of my major tasks when I took on this role about a year and a half ago now was to update that emergency operations plan. So it's in its final review. It's in the attorney's office and the mayor's office right now for that final review, and then it'll go on to a consent agenda for approval from the mayor and council. And then again, restructuring that emergency management program and team, it wasn't really a full program. It was kind of just, there were some representatives in each department kind of doing this work. And so now I'm the emergency manager and looking at what that program and team is going to look like for the future, especially for a city our size, not only employee-wise, but as a jurisdiction. So again, that EOP is under final review. Southwest border response. Not sure how closely you guys follow that, but we have a border patrol sector in our community. So their job is to process and release, legally process asylum seekers. And so there's been a couple occasions where they were at really high capacity. And we have a nonprofit that really helps in this space. But when our nonprofit capacity is full, we run the risk of seeing street releases out in the community. So I help mitigate that, and I'm the lead on that response. CSARC initiatives, so public safety is working on the Community Safety Awareness Response Center. It's the city of Tucson's version of a real-time crime center. Real-time crime centers are mostly police focused. So we decided to name it CSARC because we're trying to do a public safety approach versus just police approach. And this will allow us to have, a camera wall in the public safety communications department, kind of like a step down emergency operations center. And we're working on camera initiatives across the city to be able to pull up if there's either a planned event, like let's say Tour de Tucson, or if there's an emergency where we can turn on those cameras and see that event in real time and be able to provide support to the first responders out on the scene from a remote location. Climate action and heat response. So some of you might be familiar with Fatima Luna, the Chief Resilience Officer. So I've been supporting her in a lot of the climate action and heat response initiatives. And so kind of reviewing those response plans that she's been writing based on the ordinance that have just been passed. So supporting her on that. Creation of the emergency management website. Currently it's on ghost mode, but it is built out. And so part of that is also having banners and main pages set so that if there is an emergency, we're able to pop those banners up. And if we're telling the public, hey, go to this site for updates of that emergency, that site is already built up. We just have to input that new information, and it takes less time during that active emergency. communications plan. So the city can mobilize ways to communicate with the public and with employees during an emergency, but we don't have an actual policy written or in place. So I'm working on putting that language into a plan. That way, anybody knows at any level when to activate that communications plan. If our email system were to go down, how are we going to communicate with our employees? So making sure that that's written and on paper, and there's people who those roles and responsibilities are lined out so that not just anybody can say blast this message out. So that we have that type of policy written out. Training and exercise participation, there's lots of different organizations across town that do training and exercise. So it's important that City of Tucson participates in these because in any emergency, as the biggest city in this area here, we're likely going to provide some support, whether that's police and fire, or whether that's water, or whether that's transportation, right? Just because we have some resources that we'd be able to share should another jurisdiction need some help. So it's important that we go to these training and exercises. That way we can kind of see where those gaps might be and be better prepared to support another jurisdiction. And then also grants management. I applied for a regional catastrophic preparedness grant last year, which will help support the resilience hubs that the mayor and council are written in the Tucson Resilient Together, the climate action plan. So I'm working again with the climate action team on that. And we're halfway through the year. So what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year, aside from everything that I've done so far, and a lot of those are both current and things that I've done in this last year. Departmental COOP, so contingency operations plan. Basically how departments will continue their operations should either something happen to the public works building, or should something happen that kind of that affects the main operations of a department, making sure that those plans are in place so that we can continue to perform our duties to the public. So that's kind of what those COOPs are. Public outreach on how residents can plan for emergency preparedness. So I've been trying to put together a kind of public campaign on emergency preparedness, something that's very simple, understandable, and digestible. You can kind of see the clip I have there of make a plan, build a kit, be informed, something to that level where we can communicate that to the public so that they can be prepared. A big one, especially in the summer months, is if there's a power outage, making sure that you have what you need for about 24 to 48 hours. That's kind of the potentially not longest, but usually TEP's turnaround is pretty quick. So at least having at a minimum resources to get through a power outage in the summer for between 24 to 48 hours as an example of what that campaign would help educate. Mass evacuation planning, if you recall last February when we had that tanker spill on I-10, so that kind of triggered a gap in emergency management for the city. We don't have a mass evacuation plan, so the county just came out with theirs, so I'm going to be working with them to kind of piggyback off of theirs, and then for us to do a regional evacuation plan, since evacuations don't end on a jurisdiction or boundary line. It's important that we have regional planning efforts, so I work very closely with the county's Office of Emergency Management. And then citywide training and exercises. So I mentioned that I participated in a lot of external organization training and exercises, but putting together some department specific and eventually a citywide training and exercise plan. Usually you do that after the emergency operations plan is approved, because then you'll exercise against it and make sure that there's no gaps. And if there are, then you review that plan and put it, and then it goes for review again. So it's kind of a little bit about emergency management.
Thank you.
So Floodplain Administration is working with Savannah to go over our levee and dam safety evacuation plans. We have a levee plan that was adopted. It's a levee manual, and it's kind of a higher level plan that talks about getting these, like a levee breach emergency response for different areas where we have levees and dams, and have them individualized so that each, like let's say a subdivision is impacted by a levee, that subdivision would have an individual plan, and they could follow that if the levee were to breach.
How many levees does Tucson have?
There's between a half a dozen to a dozen.
Okay,
A couple of them are, I think, county, in the county, but downstream of those levees are city, commercial, residential areas, so they have to be protected. So we requested their plan or their maintenance activities, rather, to make sure that their maintenance of those levees is kept up to date so that our constituents are safe. And then we annexed a subdivision that has a levee. Not sure why we annexed that, but there's a subdivision that's gonna need a levee plan. And then we also have a dam / levee combo, I think it is. The Tucson, Arroyo Chico, the basins, Cherry Fields, the Tucson Unified School District has a basin, and that particular one has certain operational infrastructure, and it's considered a dam. And so if that breaches, it impacts residential properties. And so we began discussions with TUSD about doing an emergency exercise with them to go over how we can set up a specific plan for them.
So
And so
is
we're
that
gonna be working with Savannah.
downstream toward Highland?
So the Cherry Field Basin is the one to the northeast of the segment of those basins.
Right,
And so that one is kind of the bigger one,
yeah.
closer to Keno on the north side of the Arroyo Chico. And I think there's identified breach points designed in the system. So it's kind of interesting. So our next speaker, oops, see, I messed that up. That was backwards there. Next speaker is Israel, and he's going to talk a little bit more about our floodplain management plan update. I don't think I had your.
I'll wing it.
Can you?
Or you can log in as a participant.
Yeah, I don't think I ever got the link to
Oh,
the meeting. I was just coming in person, so.
Oh.
But my name is Israel Garcia. I'm with WSP. We were recently hired on by the city to help out with a lot of their stormwater needs. So we're kind of helping out with the floodplain management, as it is a lot stormwater related. As Elizabeth had said, there's a lot of mountain ranges surrounding the city of Tucson. All that water comes barreling down, and that water has to be managed appropriately so that you don't get flooding for residential folks as well as commercial. Not even up there. All right.
Yeah, I don't have to.
So as Elizabeth had shown at the beginning of the presentation, there is a map of the city of Tucson, and it gives you kind of a grand scale of what the floodplain is like with all the major drainages. Of course, you have the Santa Cruz that runs to the west of the city in general, but you have all these other larger drainages like Rolito and Canadero that all come and drain into the Santa Cruz. So floodplain management is really key to making sure that everything runs really well in the city. As Elizabeth had mentioned before, they have the 7 key principles or key categories that are focused on with the city to make sure everything's running appropriately and make sure that everyone's on high alert and knows what to do in case of a flood. Some of the categories that she had shown a little earlier on in the presentation.
If you want to email the PowerPoint.
It's pretty much just this for the most part. So, I'll just keep going. So you have public infrastructure and conveyance, flood areas with utility and municipal structures, private drainage structures, natural floodplains, geomorphical flood hazards, depending on who you are as a stakeholder. Some of these might rank higher than others, but that's what the Stormwater Technical Advisory Committee is for, is to go through these, as Elizabeth said, and with the update in 2025 and see where these things kind of rank in priority for the city, and to make sure that everything's being covered. Some examples of these categories are dams, levees, riparian areas, areas that are infested with invasive and noxious weeds and species, such as buffalo grass. Stinknet is all over the place in Arizona now. So just keeping those in mind when you're thinking about flood control, and trying to make sure that everything's being considered, not just, your regular erosion and things that you think of in levees and dams, but kind of thinking of it holistically, to make sure that everything's covered. As Elizabeth also had said earlier, there's the Tucson stormwater management study, and that's basically the city's adopted methodologies on how they're dealing with the stormwater in the city. There are software that is being used to inform other software, and then I know there's going to be new software that's going to be used as well, to just look at the whole floodplain and come up with some models and some predictions to be able to plan accordingly for 100-year floods, for 500-year floods, some of the catastrophic ones that could happen with climate change and things that are happening here in the arid Southwest. So yeah, some of the software is just being used to help inform some of the HEC1 inputs. Some potential updates in the 2025 floodplain management plan involve basin management plan updates. Just looking at the city's basins, seeing how they look, are they up to par? Does there need to be any regulation that needs to be updated? Does it need to be scaled back? Just to make sure that, everything's happening accordingly and that those basins actually work the way they're supposed to work in catching that storm water and percolating it into the aquifer. Another update might be to critical facilities being things like airports, water treatment plants, water production, energy properties, just using data-based assessments to kind of see if there's any gaps, to make sure that those facilities are protected, so that if there is a flood, that the highways stay open, that the power doesn't get knocked out in the whole city, that there's clean drinking water, that the airport can still run, and so there's not, the flood disaster doesn't start percolating out into other disasters. So there will be some assessments that are data-based with those critical facilities. The City of Tucson Drainage Manual will be updated as well. I know if you guys have seen just any manuals in general, they're very lengthy. It could be the drainage manuals, it could be engineering manuals, standard SOPs. They're typically very lengthy. So there'll be some updates to that to try and just make it more clear and concise, adding new updated information to the manuals that is more relatable to what we're seeing now. There will be some updates to procedures and drainage submittals. Again, just making it more easier for the users to make it more clear and concise and say, these are the steps you need to take to submit your drainage plans and apply for permits. And that's all you need to do. There's no what ifs or having to go from page to page to page, from application to application. So there'll be some updates to that as well. And then, as Elizabeth had just mentioned in the last presentation, there'll be some levy updates for each of the impacted areas where the levees are placed throughout the city. So that's kind of just the general floodplain management update. Again, just looking at these 7 categories, making some updates to drainage manuals, emergency management updates when it comes to dams and levees. And yeah. That's it.
So you mentioned the basins, basin studies and updates and management for those. So how closely, well, I imagine it's pretty closely working with Pima County Flood Control, as they're getting more into these medium size, not super large basins within the urban area. Do those get integrated and the management of that get integrated into this?
Yes, but I would defer to Elizabeth, she knows a little bit more.
So the larger regional basins will be part of that assessment for the watershed.
Yeah.
Some of the smaller basins
Yeah.
are gonna change the flow
Right.
conditions as it moves through.
Because we're working more closely at those mid-size, not the super large, but they may buy out 4 lots and then do a basin, it's like Seneca Basin, with
So
2 lots.
if it works with the time concentration and the hydraulics aspect of it, if it does make a difference to downstream runoff conditions, it would be incorporated.
Okay.
But we're gonna be looking at things like accessory dwelling units are a big push right now. And we're gonna ask whether or not are those increase in accessory dwelling units making a difference in
Runoff?
increased. We already have a conservative model from TSMS, and so it may be that it's already incorporated into it, or it may not be, and so we'll have to look at maybe increasing development requirements to be maybe 20% instead of a 15% reduction in the offsite outfall of the flow from a development site. Because currently we have a 0 to 15% decrease for development. And so if we, want to be more conservative, we look at 20%. The
Well, that's
approach,
interesting, now that we have some of the data about the runoffs, with the rainwater harvesting and what gets deferred and what doesn't get as part of the runoff now, so even with ADUs, will that, I don't know, maybe make it a requirement that if you're adding an ADU, you need to have a
Correct.
basin or a
Yes.
cistern.
and that's part of what we're going to be looking at. We're going to say, is this making an impact if we have X number of ADUs in certain watersheds? How does that impervious increase change the runoff characteristics? And if it is, then we're going to be changing development standards to make sure that we're reducing it back to what our intent was for TSMS, or looking at other aspects. If there's a climate data saying we have to do even more reduction, then we'll do that. So the action plan items for each of those 7 categories are in our floodplain management plan. And we'll be going over all of those for the 5-year update. Every year, annual ones, these are being updated annually. So we're taking any input on the action plan right now. We do an annual mini report just to summarize our discussions, like in this meeting, and with the floodplain administration staff, and with our previous FMP stakeholder group. We've had meetings with the previous TSMS engineering staff, or engineers that have worked on TSMS in the past, and we're having other meetings to discuss our strategic plan on how to approach the FMP update. The plan will have like timelines, like for instance, we'll have City of Tucson drainage manual updated by 2026, let's say, or we'll have you know, the standard FMP action plan update, obviously in 2025. But we'll have a strategic plan for each of the items that we were discussing on updating for TSMS. Next speaker is our Cy Miller from J.E. Fuller, and he's going to be talking about the Alamo Wash project and basin study, and as well as geomorphological issues in the floodplain. Thanks, Cy.
Is it possible to get to the PowerPoint?
Yeah, you're here.
The actual, like, the PowerPoint file?
Oh. I only have this. Is that,
Yeah,
or
okay.
did you have interactive
Oh, I had all
aspects?
kinds of exciting things
Oh.
in the PowerPoint, but it's fine. I can go ahead with it as it is.
You know, while you're starting, I'll send it over to Michael and maybe we can get it to work.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks. Thank you. My name is Cy Miller with J.E. Fuller. I wanted to present on the Alamo Wash Basin Management Plan. It was a project that we were involved with and supported in 2007, around the 2017 timeframe. I think it was finalized in about 2020. We were a sub to CMG on this one, and our contract and project was with Pima County Flood Control. But City of Tucson, Elizabeth was, you know, a key partner in the project. And, you know, I was asked to present about geomorphological issues, geomorphological hazards. I'm not a geomorphologist per se, but I am an engineer, and I consider myself kind of a student of geomorphology and you know, especially how it affects our you know, definition of flood hazards throughout the city and elsewhere. So, okay. So the Alamo Wash watershed, how many are familiar with the Alamo Wash? Okay. Sometimes I channel my Uncle Rico and I say I could throw a tennis ball from my backyard into the Alamo Wash. I live pretty close in it. I live in the watershed. I live pretty close to the wash. So it's kind of near and dear to me. I was excited to get involved in a project that was, you know, in my backyard essentially. But, you know, it goes, it's 10.4 square miles. Through the heart of the city, Tucson includes Park Mall, and it's bounded on the south side around Colwood, Irvington, near the Air Force Base, on the west side by Swan, and on the north side by the Rito Creek. Alamo Wash drains into Rito Creek. So that said, it includes the tributaries of Arcadia, Saguaro, and Van Buren washes, which are three named other water courses besides the Alamo Wash within the watershed. It's mostly urban, it's almost completely developed, you know, with an urban land use. And notably, we've got 23 miles. Some statements I've seen said 26 miles. I did the modeling, I should know, but it was a number of years ago. I know it was a long runs of storm drains, you know, within the urban setting, transverse across the street and catch basins on the side. I mean, all kinds of storm drain and inlet configurations. In the table are some statistics about the watershed, the open channels. We had 13 miles, and then I'll just point out these at-grade wash crossings. We had 38 at-grade wash crossings. I went to a pool party on Sunday, a friend's house, and I crossed the Alamo Wash, I think twice or 4 times to get to their house through a dip crossing. I think we're probably all familiar with these dip crossings. And as far as hazards go, I see those as being the biggest hazard present in the watershed, just because of people will try to drive through it and you know, get their car stuck and have to be rescued or their car. So our base management plan had some you know, sort of typical aspects, you know, an existing conditions analysis, which noted the urban watercourse nature, reaches with the concrete bank erosion protection and all the storm drains. We did our hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. We used Float2D in this one with a 15-foot grid covering the entire watershed. That allowed us to couple the storm drain analysis with the Float2D runoff calculations. And that was supported by a flood frequency analysis. We were lucky enough to have a gauge in our watershed that we were able to tie the historic data to our model results. Sure. We went through an alternatives analysis and selection that, the difference between a study and a plan was we actually came up with potential solutions for the watershed for some of the identified problems. And that involved a huge public outreach and public participation part. Okay. So. Here. Okay, I think that was all I had on that slide. So geomorphology, I'll just point out here the scientific study of the origin and evolution of topographic features generated by physical, chemical, or biological processes operating at or near the Earth's surface. So there's a whole study realm of geomorphology. This is sort of recent time frame geomorphology as it affects our city infrastructure. But I do know that the city's floodplain management plan listed all these potential hazards as they relate to geomorphology in the city. So one geomorphological fundamental that's happening that we see in the Alamo Wash particularly is the incision of the watercourse, where the bed of the wash is dropping down. That's the stage 2. We go from a stable condition to an incision condition where the bed of the wash drops down, and over time the banks will start to erode back, the wash will widen, and then it's typically, in a normal sense, in a normal case, we'll get to a stage 5 where we get kind of a quasi-equilibrium, where we get an inset floodplain and a new floodplain. The historical floodplain up above on the upper terrace is disconnected from the flood flows. And it develops basically a new floodplain inset within the incised channel. So this is quiz time. Which of these geomorphological hazards does not occur in the Alamo Wash? And I've got a parting gift for anybody who can get it. We've got channel head cutting, erosion hazard setbacks, debris flows, lateral erosion, sedimentation, and uncertain flow paths. I know many of you are not geomorphologists, but anybody have a guess?
Please. Which one does not?
Which one does not?
Sedimentation.
I observed some sedimentation.
Yeah, it's always sedimentation.
Well, it's debris flows. Anyway,
Oh.
so debris flows, I saw an opportunity to show a video of what debris flows look like in geomorphology. This is exciting to me. It's cool. It's going to exist in the Alamo Wash. But anyway, we'll move on. So that's what a debris flow looks like. So anyway, what we see in our picture here on the left-hand side of the screen is a condition that I observed during the field work for the project. We've got our top of bank here. I'm standing on the opposite top of bank, taking a picture of this exposed utility. Down here is the channel bed. I'd say in this picture, the channel bed is about as deep off the bottom of the utility as it is to the top of the, to the top of the bank. So we have an incised channel in this case. In this case, we had the toe of concrete slope. So there was a concrete slope protection that was built to protect this utility. And at the time that they built it, I think that they thought that that was the toe and that was never going to change, the toe of slope. But of course, as we see today, that did change. And we see this exposed utility as a result. So the channel wash has cut down below this utility. And now we're faced with a potentially hazardous condition if that utility was to break as a result of, say, a flood flow. So that's just getting back to our sort of standard.
Is that a sanitary?
Fundamental. I think it is. I think many of these are sewer lines. Yes, sanitary sewer. So of the observed erosion, this is from one of the reports we generated during the study. Very urban and experiencing clear water scour conditions, meaning that sediment supply is low due to the developed nature and the channel flows with an appetite for sediment. That means that all the clean water, all the clear water that runs in off parking lots and houses and things like that is hungry to carry sediment. Really, the only place to pick it up is from the bed of the wash, and we get this incising characteristic of the wash. Bank erosion does exist, but there's surprisingly very little quantity of it in comparison to the length of the water. So This is what I noted during some of the field work. This is facing upstream at a dip crossing. So I was standing at a dip crossing facing upstream. This is, I think, in Arcadia Wash. And you can see this ponding here. This was after the rain event. There's ponding in the bottom of the water course. And what this tells me is that even on the upstream side of the dip crossing, water course is incising, okay? This is the downstream side of the dip crossing. I think this is that pond that we can see up there. This might not be the same dip crossing, but this shows the fundamentals that I'm trying to demonstrate. And the downstream side of the dip crossing is now degraded down below to where a lot of the erosion protection on the downstream side is now being undermined there. So
I have a question.
yeah,
is this more just localized scour, like just downstream, upstream of different junctions or the edges of these embankments? Or is it definitely like in that first picture with the sewer, it's going down?
It's not
sizing.
It's not entirely throughout every part of the water course, but it is in many parts. It's just inside, and we've confined it too. You know, we've got dedicated drainage ways, we've got right of way, we've got public common areas or something like that confines the limitations of the wash. So really, the only place it has to go oftentimes is down if it wants to pick up sediment. So there's erosion near slope protections. Again, we have exposed utilities and sedimentation. So this was sedimentation. This is the north end of the watershed where it gets close to the confluence with Rito. We can see this outlet control flapper is not even operational because it's sedimented in. And there's some upstream things that they're trying to prevent that, to mitigate that, but I don't think they're all that functional. So how does this play into our infrastructure needs? I can see this when I leave my house in the morning. This is a grade control structure. What we're showing now is a picture from 2012. The cross section at the right is the cross section at the right is of the grade control structure. We've got flow in the cross section. We've got flow left to right, but in the plan view aerial photo, we've got flow right to left. And how that's being affected is the undermining is causing the concrete foundation below the bank protection or below the grade control structure, to be washed away. And that concrete that was there in a wedge kind of pattern is now falling into the wash, and eventually over time, this may have some problems, I think. So I see this in a progressive fashion in that, we have maintenance probably needs. And then eventually, if we don't get to those maintenance needs, we'll have to have repairs. And if we don't get to those repairs, then we'll probably need to have reconstruction on some of these things, if we do want to keep the wash where it is today.
Sounds like road maintenance and repair reconstruction issues.
It will be a project,
Yeah.
I think.
Not having the funding to do these,
Yeah.
the maintenance, and then we have to move to repairs, and then not having enough money for that, and not having money to reconstruct even.
Yep.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. So, the uncertain flow paths. I did want to touch on this. This is one of the hazards identified in the floodplain management plan. What we have here is a map of, this is the flow-to-D model. The warmer colors show our predicted depths in the streets and through overland. Our flow-to-D model. The black lines are the TSMS HEC 1 watersheds. So in this case, we have uncertain flow paths, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. The Alamo Wash on the right-hand side of the screen is flowing north. Then we've got Saguaro in the middle of the screen flowing north, and Van Buren Wash is also flowing north. And what we see is that along those black lines, we've got flow predicted to violate the discrete watershed boundaries that are used and that support the HEC 1 model for TSMS. I'm not saying TSMS is bad, but I'm just saying that with a refined model, we can predict when those flows start to overtop. I mean, maybe we wouldn't see these flows exiting the watershed in a 2-year storm or even a 10-year storm, but a 100-year storm, they start to break out And what that results in is that, you know, if we assume all that area in that discrete watershed is draining to a particular point, and it's actually draining to another point, or part of it is draining to another point, we might overpredict in one location, we might underpredict, you know, at the other. So this is uncertainty. You know, I think with a refined model like you know, Flood2D or 2D analysis, you can see those types of things. Whereas with a 1D analysis like HEC1, you just can't, unless you break your subwatersheds down to a really, really fine scale. You know, one benefit that I saw of this potential, you know, this channel incision, and I don't know if this is entirely attributed to the channel incision, but I think it helped, is that we were able to, during the course of the project, identify a number of locations where the FEMA special flood hazard areas were inaccurate to what we predicted using Flood2D. The shaded colors on the map are the previously effective flood hazard areas, and our outlines here show our LOMR, when we did a letter of map revision to reduce some of the floodplain areas through the city. Sometimes it got expanded, but for the most part, I think there was an overall net reduction in flood hazard area. Other aspects that could lead to the reduction in flood hazard areas, storm drains, our detailed topography, and our improved modeling techniques could also have led to that. But I saw the channel incision leading to an increased capacity as allowing us to reduce the floodplain in some locations. So that was what I had. I missed one part about those dip crossings. When we have, you know, incision, especially on the upstream and downstream sides, you know, one of the biggest hazards in my mind is when the wash is flowing, trying to drive through a dip crossing, they say, you don't know if the pavement's still there. And so, you know, it might only look like it's 6 inches deep and you might be able to try to make it with your car, but, you know, you never know what's going on underneath. And especially as, you know, these things start to degrade, you know, they're going to be more and more hazardous. So,
Could you say that in some cases for this incision issue, that widening the channel may help that condition for those segments? Or is that just one option?
It seems to me widening would help. Again, you're going to get greater capacity with a wider section. And so I would imagine that the flow will flow more shallow and be a little slower, yeah, and less likely to inside. At some point, especially if the washes continue to be checked using the structural features that we have, you know, the dip crossings or the bridges or the culverts or those like a drop structure that I showed, if we maintain those things and we keep the bed where it is, you know, it's less likely to keep incising. But you know,
So adding more spillway, energy dissipation.
Yeah, I think those things would help. Yeah.
Is this a part of the problem of widening the land use, that the properties are just right abutting the Alamo
This
Wash?
is the Alamo Wash. Yeah,
Yeah.
some of them are very, very close. Yeah.
Unless we put in like a concrete side embankment.
Yeah.
But a lot of these washes are wash ordinance, so we can't just add concrete. That's a mayor and council decision on those. Right.
And there's also private property
Right.
issue.
And the
They
property.
don't have the space to
Yeah.
widen it out.
Is there any questions?
Are you familiar with the Alamo Wash Greenway project?
Yeah, I've seen some things about it. Yeah.
It's gonna be like a $30 million project,
Yeah,
10-foot wide asphalt pad next to it.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it
So maybe with that, I'm just thinking some of the improvements, drainage improvements would be done.
Sure. In a lot of locations along it, there's I noted that there's like an alley on maybe the top of bank that is used by the trash trucks. You know, go down the alleys. Maintenance and other things, yeah. And so I think in a lot of places it already exists. There's a few points that I know are needed to have some structural, you know, something done there to create that section. But I rode my bike from my house all the way to the top of the Alamo Wash watershed doing field work. And it was not an easy bike ride, I have to say. It was pretty difficult through a lot of sections. But it can be done. I think the Greenway will be a big improvement.
Oh,
Yeah.
Maybe Jay Fuller needs to.
Yeah, I mean, that includes lighting, it includes green infrastructure, you know.
Yeah.
And some of it goes on the streets, neighborhood streets,
Uh-huh.
you know, certain sections.
Right, right.
So we've got, I think that's the end of our presentations today. We
Try to hear the the other one, if you go over to the left.
Wrong way. Yep, that one.
If you go down. Thanks for pulling up the PowerPoint, Elizabeth.
Yeah,
The
sorry, I
video
realized
was,
we had that interactive aspect. So I think that's it. I actually had a link on this that I don't know if it'll run. This is the CDO debris flow in 2020 after the Bighorn fire. You can see it moving through. The county flood control said that this was steam coming off. No, this is not lava moving. This is dust coming off of this ashy laden debris that, see how it hits some of the dusty sides of and it creates this smoke looking thing, but it's actually just dust. But you see some standing wave action there. It's a mix of water and debris. That's kind of interesting. So that's it for our presentation today. We